Welcome to Crossing Online. We are so grateful that you have joined us this morning. I don't know about you, have you ever wanted to ask God to show himself and make himself real to you? You ever asked him to do that? I know that I have. And you know what? Maybe today he really has, but you're going to have to hang out a little bit longer to find out. Throughout this hour, we're going to sing some songs. The band's going to play, and we would invite you to join in and sing. If you're in the shower, you can sing as loud as you want. If you're in your PJs, you can sing as loud as you want. If you're in a small group, I dare you to sing as loud as you can sing. Or you can, you know what, if you're not a singer, that's totally fine. You can just meditate on the songs, and I would invite you to do that. But I hope that you enjoy this morning as we have a message, and hopefully we'll answer that question. Has God made himself real? Is there something to see? And if there is, I'm going to encourage you to look at it. So thank you for joining us. Wherever you are, we are so grateful that you've joined in, and I hope that you walk away from this morning inspired, taking maybe a look at Jesus that you haven't taken before, and encouraged if you are a Jesus follower. Let's get after it.
I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. Oh, I was breathing but not alive. Oh, all my failures I tried to hide. It was my tomb till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul, and now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you, when you called my name, and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness into your glorious day. My sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave. Oh, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
promised king would welcome me. I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Realized he has ransomed me, his grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child Oh, it's free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Hey, Crossing. So during this time of our service right now, normally we would move into our time of offering, but we're not exactly going to ask you to pass baskets around your living room. You can if you really want to, but I would encourage you to give during this time. Just because we're in quarantine and doing all those different things doesn't mean our ministry here as a church stops. We're still on a day-to-day basis trying to find ways that we can give and help others and still do ministry, because the goal of seeing people meet, follow, and love Jesus doesn't stop when there's a virus going around. So we're continuing to do things and we're continuing to serve and do what God has called us to do as a church. So I would encourage you to give during this time. There's a couple different ways that you can do that. The first way, you could mail a check to us at P.O. Box 17. Just write down the address that we have here on the screen and you can just send a check to us that way. Another way that you can give is text to give. So just text any amount to this number here and that'll come to us as well. And if you want to, you can go online to thecrossingfellowship.com/give. And that will take you to a place where you can either set up a recurring payment to give online or just do a one-time gift, whatever works for you and how you can give that way. And then one thing that I would challenge you to do, if you're normally one of the people that on a Sunday morning when the baskets come around, you drop the cash in the basket or drop it in the basket on your way out, I would challenge you and encourage you to still give. Whether you're passing an envelope around your living room and you put all the cash in there, and then at the end of service you count out how much it is and then write a check for that amount and mail it to us, or you throw your money in a pot and then you decide how much to give online based off of that. Whatever you choose to do, I would encourage you to give during this time, even though we're not able to meet together. You know, a couple weeks ago, we went through a finance series talking about how we need to be putting God first in our lives and putting God first in our finances. So Crossing, I would really challenge you during this time to put God first in your finances and to give. Whether that's giving to us directly as a church or finding other ways that you can be open-handed with your finances and what God has blessed you with. In order to give and help your neighbors or other people that are in need during this time. But whatever it is you choose to do, however it is you choose to give, remember to put God first with your finances.
Hey, I just want to say thank you for joining in with us. I'm Eric Most, the lead pastor of The Crossing, and I'm so glad that you've joined. Crossing, thank you so much for joining in. I can't wait for the time where we can actually gather together in the same room. I am so looking forward to that, and I want to let you know when that happens, it is going to be a huge party. So I hope you're looking forward to that. I know that I am. And if you're not a part of The Crossing and you just joined in with this live stream, I just want to say to you, thanks for joining in. If you're coming across this and you just clicked on it, maybe you're skeptical of the Bible. In fact, you're not even sure there is a God. Maybe you would even put yourself in the classification of an atheist, but you're just bored to death. And so you clicked on this because you don't have anything else to do. I want to say thank you for doing that, and I hope that you will enjoy as you come along with us on this journey, because we have been looking at, and maybe one of the reasons you're skeptical is you think Christians just believe blindly, and I would say many of them probably do. And sometimes we as preachers can be at fault at asking Christians or asking people to believe blindly, and we shouldn't do that. In fact, the Apostle John would say that's actually kind of silly. In fact, it's irresponsible. And he writes in his gospel, and we've been tracking with John through his gospel as he presents the evidence that brought him to the place where he said, you know what? I believe that Jesus is who he said he was. I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And what's kind of interesting, I don't know about you, have you ever asked God, I know that I have you ever asked God, could you just show me something that would make me believe that you're actually there and that you're real? I mean, could you give me a sign? Could you show me something? And sometimes I think, and I know it's dangerous to put words in the mouth of God, so I'm careful to do that, but I think if we could actually ask God to do that, I think he might say, well, what do you want? I mean, like what? Maybe like a great big ginormous rock that would hold life of, billions of people, that could sustain life, that would be in stark contrast to all of the other floating ginormous rocks that are floating in the universe, perfectly positioned with a heat source that is in a spot where it's not so hot that you just, bake like a egg on a hot day on a highway, or that you freeze to death, but it's perfectly positioned to where it can sustain life. I mean, is that something that would be big enough for you to say, man, that's kind of interesting? Or maybe you say, well, yeah, that's good, God, but what else do you got? Well, how about something a little bit more personal? I mean, what if God gave you a 576 megapixel camera? What if he gave you a 576 megapixel camera, and not only would he give you one of them, he'd give you two of them. And with two of them, he would place them straight on your forehead for you to see. And not only that, but actually attach it to a 3,000 megahertz computer that can store all of the data that it sees, and not only just store all of that data, but be able to process through all of that, to be able to write that down, to be able to record it, to be able to pass it on from generation to generation to generation, to be able to figure out some of the most complex systems of how God's made this world to work and figure those things out. And by the time I'm even done saying this sentence, 50,000 cells in your body are going to die and be replaced by 50,000 more cells without any conscious effort of your own. And each one of those cells will have 3.1 billion individual letters that contain your DNA. I mean, sometimes I think God would be like what else do you want to see? And sometimes I think, oh, no. I mean, we want to see something truly spectacular. To which I think God's like, I mean, I don't know what more you would want. I mean, I just think that's kind of crazy. See, we've been going through this whole series, and we're in part 5 of our series called Bystander. And like I said earlier, I think John would say, I don't expect you to believe blindly. I want you to observe the evidence. And he's just going to lay out from an eyewitness standpoint the evidence of why he came to the conclusion that Jesus was who he said he was. And he's going to lay it out, and he's going to say, hey, I'm laying it out for you, And if you will weigh the evidence, if you will actually be able, if you'll be willing to look at it and actually investigate it, he thinks you might come to the same conclusion that he came to. In fact, in John chapter 20, John gives us the whole reason why he writes his gospel, and he says, "But I have written these things so that you could continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah." If you're Jewish, that Jesus is your Messiah. And if you're not Jewish, that Jesus is the unique Son of God. And that by believing in, not just believing that there was a guy named Jesus, no, it's so much bigger than that, but trusting in, by putting all of your weight on, by believing in him, you will have life, eternal life, abundant life, a life filled with purpose, a life that's filled with joy and peace of heart and mind by the power of his name. So we've been tracking with John through the gospel as he lays out the evidence of why he came to the conclusion that Jesus was who he said he was. And today, we're going to look at Jesus and his disciples as they are in Jerusalem, and while they're there, they run across a blind beggar, and they have an interaction with him. And we're going to pick up the story in John chapter 9 and verse 1. It says, "As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, 'Why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins?'" So in the first century, they thought if you were born blind or if you were born handicapped or if something, major happened in your life that caused you some kind of sorrow or some kind of pain and suffering, that happened to you because of your sin or your parents' sin. In their mind, there was this cause-effect relationship with God. In fact, maybe that's why you're skeptical of God, because that's your view of God. You think that that's how God interacts with you, where there's this cause-effect. If you do good things, then God blesses you, and if you mess up, well, God's right there to smack you down and make sure that something really horrible happens to you. And so this is the way the disciples thought, and so they naturally asked Jesus, which one was it for this guy? Jesus' response is so interesting. In verse 3 it says, "It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins." In other words, neither. It wasn't either one of those things. That's not how God's made the world to work. Now, we understand sometimes we do things that causes pain to our own lives, right? I mean, we know that. Or other people do things, or through their sin, we get the collateral damage, we get the shrapnel from other people's actions that come and cause us some pain and suffering. But lots of times, we know when that's the case, right? We're aware that, yeah, I did that, and it just came back to bite me, and I'm reaping what I sowed. But when it comes to other things, Jesus is introducing a brand new category for these guys. Jesus answered, This happened to this guy so the power of God could be seen in him." In other words, pain has a purpose. Jesus is introducing a brand new category. In fact, pain may always have a purpose. And for this guy, Jesus says this guy's pain, or this person was born this way so that God's power could be displayed. Isn't it true? If everything went, hunky-dory, if every single person made millions of dollars, lived in comfort, got all the scholarships, were as smart as could be, life was just wrinkle-free and painless, and you lived to be 90 and you died in your sleep, no one would be too impressed, right? I mean, isn't it the person? In fact, we have some people in this church that you watch them walk through their pain and suffering of the circumstances that they've gone through, and you're just like, there has got to be a God, because there is no explanation for why they walk through the circumstances that they've walked through. And to see their faith, I mean, it is so inspiring. It is so it just inspires you to say, you know what? There has to be a God. You see, sometimes God chooses to display his power on the platform of our pain and suffering. And so Jesus says this happened so the power of God could be seen in him. In verse 4, we must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. To which the disciples were like, time out, Jesus. There you go again. You're always going off. We're talking about one thing, and then all of a sudden you say some random thing that doesn't seem to make any sense to what it is that we were talking about. And here you go again, just saying some random thing. We have no idea what you're talking about. And Jesus says, but while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. So in other words, what he's saying is, listen, while I am here, I am the light of the world, and there is a purpose for why I'm here. And while I'm here, I'm going to show the signs that points to the fact that I am who I say I am. And when I leave, and the time is coming when I will leave, and when I leave, it will be dark. And then I'm going to hand it off to you, and you will carry the light of the world with you to a very dark world. Verse 6, this is awesome. This is hilarious. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. Now I'm like, John, really? That's all you're going to give us? I mean, give us a little bit more detail of what's going on around it, because I'm just imagining, I mean, did they tell the guy that, hey, you know, this is what we're going to do. We're going to spit on the ground, we're going to make some mud, and we're going to put it on your eyes. Would that be okay? I mean, did they tell the guy what they were going to do? I mean, is Jesus over there like, you know, hawking up some saliva enough to make some mud? I mean, what in the world? And the guy can't see what's going on, so it's just like, what exactly is happening? And all of a sudden, you know, they slap some mud on his eyes. He can't even see. And then they're like, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. So he tells him, so the man went and washed. Now, think about this. What would you do if you were the blind guy and some random guy walks up to you and, you know what, makes some saliva and all of a sudden splats mud on your eyes and says, hey, why don't you go wash that off? You'll be able to see. What would you do? Oh, you're a funny guy, mocking me, mocking my condition. I ain't going anywhere. In fact, he was probably used to people mocking him because of the way that society looked at them. If they thought the reason he was in the condition that he was in was because of his own sin or his parents' sin, can you imagine how society treated handicapped people? Not well. And so he probably got mocked all the time, and you put yourself in his shoes, he had to have thought, I ain't going anywhere. But what does he do? He walks to the pool. And Jesus in this moment is foreshadowing what he is asking you to do and me to do. To walk by faith, not by what? Not by what? Okay, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. All of you that are in your living rooms, whether you're in your car, whether you're by yourself, whether you're riding your horse, whatever it is you're doing, I want to hear it really, really, really loud, okay? He walked by faith, not by, yeah, I think I almost heard you. All right. He walked by faith, not by sight. Jesus is foreshadowing what he's going to be asking you to do and what he's asking me to do. So the man literally walked by faith, not by sight. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and the others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said he was, and others said, "No, he just looks like him," which is exactly what our response would be like. It's like, isn't that the guy? I mean, oh, well, that can't be the guy. I mean, it probably just looks like him because, after all, miracles like that don't happen, right? I mean, they just don't happen. So it has to be someone else. But the beggar kept saying, "Yes, I'm the same one." And so they asked him, "Who healed you? What happened? Tell us the story. We want to hear." Well, he told them, "The man they call Jesus made mud." I don't think they told him how he made the mud. "And spread it over my eyes and told me, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself.' So I went and washed, and now I can see." And this is hilarious. In fact, this might be one of the most hilarious things in the Bible right here. And so they said, "Where is he now?" they asked. "I don't know," he replied. And John doesn't record this, but I'm thinking, I didn't see where he went. Sherlock? I mean, you're asking me where he went. I was blind. How am I supposed to know where he went? But they're asking him, where did he go? Well, I don't know where he went. And then they took the man, really nice neighbors and friends here. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees. And why did they take him to the Pharisees? Because it was on the Sabbath, there's Jesus again, that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. And so they're kind of bringing the guy to the Pharisees, and they're kind of ratting out Jesus because he did this on the Sabbath. Well, the Pharisees in verse 15 asked the man all about it. So he told them, "He put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see." And some of the Pharisees said, "This man Jesus is not from God." Isn't that interesting? "For he is working on the Sabbath." Others said, "But how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs?" So there was a deep division of opinion among them. See, all of us have a God box. All of us, depending on how we were raised and the circumstances in which we were raised and the circumstances that happened around us while we were being raised, we all have a God box. We all have a box that we decide, this is what God is like, and this is what God should do, and this is what God shouldn't do. And based on what our God box is, isn't it interesting how we decide what other people should do? And maybe you're here and you're watching this and you would say, I don't even believe there is a God. You have a non-God box. And you've decided if there was a God, this is what he would do, and this is what he wouldn't do. And the Pharisees, they have their God box, and Jesus isn't acting in a way in accordance with their God box. And so they're like, you know what? He can't be from God. Even though there is something to see right in front of them, there is something to see, they are not willing to look at it. And isn't that true for us? In fact, some of us as Jesus followers, our God box, you know what? We can't think that God might be bigger than our box. And so, based on what we think God is like, we transfer that over to other people to tell them what we think they should look like, how long their hair should be, what they should wear to church, how many times they should be at church, the things that they should do. And we have all of these opinions of, you know what? this is the God of my box, and I don't think God could ever be any bigger than my box. This is where the Pharisees are at. They've made a box. And they've said, you know what? Jesus is breaking the Sabbath. In fact, he wasn't breaking the Sabbath. He was breaking what their extra rules were that they made up of what they thought that the Sabbath should be. And so by doing that, they just said, you know what? This is the box that I'm going to put God in, and I'm going to make the rules around what the Sabbath should be. And since Jesus is breaking our man-made rules, well, he can't be from God. And so the Pharisees said, this man Jesus is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others were like, well, how could an ordinary man do that? I mean, he has to be from God. So they were split in their opinion. Verse 17, then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? And the man replied, I don't know. He must be a prophet. Obviously, I don't know exactly who he is, but he has to be from God, or he has to be working on behalf of God. He has to be connected to God somehow, because there's no other explanation for why I'm standing in front of you, being able to see. So in verse 18, the Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see, so they called in his parents. So they're going to vet the guy, which I would say, that's good. That would be reasonable, right? We would want to vet the guy as well. And so we would ask the parents to come and verify what's going on. That's just smart, right? And so they're vetting the guy. And so they ask the parents to come in. And they ask the parents, is this your son? Was he born blind? And if so, how can he now see? Verse 20, his parents replied, we know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He is old enough to speak for himself. And his parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. In other words, they had pre-decided what they believed about Jesus, and they weren't willing. They weren't willing to look when there was something to see. Which I think there's some application there for us. Whether we're Jesus followers and we've confined God to a box and he's actually bigger than that, or maybe you're watching this and you would say, I don't think there is a God, and your non-God box, you're not willing to look outside of that either. You're not willing to look at the evidence. If there's something to be seen, and we're just like the Pharisees. We're not willing to see something when there's actually something there to see. Verse 24. So for the second time, they called in the man who had been blind and told him, God should get the glory for this. In other words, we want you to give God the glory for this, not Jesus, not that guy. Don't be giving him any credit whatsoever. We're going to tell you who to give the credit to, and we're going to tell you who you should give glory to, and it's God, not Jesus. Don't be giving Jesus any credit. Because we know this man Jesus is a sinner. And he's a sinner because he's not keeping our man-made rules. He's not jumping through the hoops that we have set up that people are supposed to jump through. And some of you, maybe that's why you're not a Jesus follower yet. Maybe that's why you know what, you would say you were a Christian for a while, but then you got out because you were in a religious system where a group of people, or maybe that religious institution or that church had a bunch of man-made rules and hoops that you were supposed to jump through, and you looked at it and you kind of saw it for what it was, and you were just like, no, I don't think that's God's deal. I think that's man-made rules, and you're asking me to jump through a bunch of man-made ruled hoops. And in so doing, they kind of pushed you out. Verse 25, I don't know, the blind beggar says, this guy that can see now, he says, I don't know whether he is a sinner. The man replied, but I know this. I was blind, and now I can see. I don't know everything, and I don't need to know everything. But this I know. I was blind, and now I can see. And isn't that the story for many of you that are watching this? It's the story of millions of people around the globe right now, where they would say, you know what? I can't answer all of the questions. I don't know all of the verses. I don't know how God's made everything to work. I don't have all of the answers to everything. But this is something that I know. I was going my own way. And there came a point in time when I surrendered. I said, okay, I'm done. I'm done with me. I came to the end of myself, and I surrendered my heart. I surrendered my mind. I surrendered my soul to Jesus. And in so doing, when that happened, all of a sudden, the things that I thought that I knew and the things that I thought that I could see how blind I was. And now I see something happened to me when I surrendered to Jesus. That's the story of millions of people around this world. And here's the thing. You know what? You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to understand everything to believe something. See, I get this. For some of you that are skeptical of the Bible and you're not sure there's a God, you want to understand everything before you believe anything, which makes sense. I get it. I understand that. But you don't hold yourself to that standard in any other arena of life. In all of the other arenas of life, you're fine not understanding everything. I mean, think about it. Do you believe in love? Yeah. Can you understand it? I don't understand it. What about energy? Believe in energy? Momentum? The energy and momentum? Yeah? Can you understand it? Can you explain it? Not really. What about consciousness? What about consciousness? I mean, can you explain it? No? I can't really explain it. And yet, I'm okay with it, and I believe it. See, it is okay to not understand everything, to believe something. Verse 26, he goes on. But what did he do? So the Pharisees are kind of doubling down on this guy, and this guy, he's about ready to just, he's getting to the boiling point where he's just about had enough of these Pharisees. But what did he do, they asked. How did he heal you? Look, in verse 27, look, the man exclaimed, I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to be his disciples too? And so the guy, he's just about had enough. And he is digging. He is seeing the Pharisees for who they really are. That there is something to see, and because of their stubbornness, because of their arrogance, because of their pride, they are not willing to look at something that is so close to them that can be seen. Verse 28, then they cursed him and said, you are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. And the blind beggar, his response is just phenomenal. In verse 30 he says, well, why? That's very strange. That is very strange. The man replied, he healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. In other words, there's something to see, and you're not willing to look at it. He healed my eyes, and yet you do not know where he comes from. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done this. Well, in response, the Pharisees say, you were born a total sinner. In other words, we're just going to stick you in a category and we're going to shame you down to nothing. Are you trying to teach us? They said, do you hear the arrogance? And they threw him out of the synagogue. Excommunicated. Maybe some of you could relate. You wouldn't say excommunicated, but you were pushed out. You didn't jump through the hoops that were man-made, and somehow you were supposed to jump through those, and you were pushed out. Willful blindness. Willful blindness. And I want to address, a couple of you, maybe you're here, you're a Jesus follower. You're watching this, and you would say, I'm a Jesus follower. And you have a God box. And there's a lot of things that have been put into what you think God is like and what you think God is not like. And my question to you is, could God be bigger than that box? And based on what you think God is like, that's what you think people should wear, and that's what you think people should look at, and that's the genre of music you think they should listen to, and here's the things that they should attend, and you've made a list of everything that you think people should be and do. Maybe even a church. You think the church should follow this and do these things. And I would just say, do you think that God might be bigger than your box? And maybe you're here and you have willful blindness, and you would say, I don't even think there is a God. But could it be that there's something bigger than your non-God box? That there might actually be something to see? That if you would actually look at it, there is something there to see. There is evidence to look at. But you just pass it by. And based on your background, based on your experience, based on your circumstances, you've decided if there was a God, this is what he would be like. And could it be that you're not willing to look at something that could be seen? See, willful blindness, the refusing to look, refusing to see what can be seen. And let me gently say, could it be that, you know what, maybe you're in a situation where your spouse believes, but you don't. Your spouse believes, but you don't. And you couldn't even stomach the thought. So you're not even willing to look, because if you looked and if there was actually something to see, and if there was something to see and it pointed to the evidence that it was right, that there was correct, that would make your spouse right. And you couldn't stand the thought that your spouse might be right. And so you're not going to look. You're not going to see. You're not going to see, even though there is something there to see. John says, I just want you to know there's something to see. In fact, that's why I wrote my entire gospel. Because I don't want you to just blindly believe. That's silly and irresponsible. I want you to believe based on the evidence of an eyewitness that watched the signs with my very own eyes. I heard it with my very own ears. I was physically there. I could touch it. And in so laying these things out, that you would come to the conclusion, John would say, that I came to. That you would believe in, that you would trust in, that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the Son of God, and by believing in him, you could have life, eternal life. That Jesus, if he is who he said he was, that he actually predicted his own death, burial, and resurrection, and in so doing, that he gets to say, you know what? There is life found in him. Eternal life, abundant life, security of life, joyful life, peaceful life found in him, in the power of his name. So crossing Jesus followers, I hope that the foundation of your faith becomes more and more secure as you look at the evidence. And I would encourage you to really assess, what is it that you think about God? And as you study the scriptures, that your thoughts about God would be based on what you find there, not in man-made ideas of what you think God might be like. And if you are skeptical of God, you're outside, maybe you're just investigating, maybe you've been pushed out and you're looking at it again, that you would look to see if there's something there to actually be seen, that you would say, you know what, if there's something there to see, I'm going to look at it. And it would start you on a journey of investigating whether the claims of Jesus, that he is the Son of God, are actually true. I think when you weigh the evidence, you may come to the conclusion that millions of people have come to, that I've come to, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for our time. Thank you for the evidence that you laid out. Thank you for being the light of the world, Jesus. God, I pray for those who right now, they need that light more than any other time maybe of their life. That they would place their faith in you and they would follow you. God, for those who are skeptical and those who are just, they're just weighing whether they want to actually look and see, I pray that you would give them the courage to actually look and see if there's actually something there to see. And God, you would set them on a journey that would bring them to a place where they could make an intelligent decision of whether your claims, Jesus, are true or not. I pray that you would give us wisdom, give us patience, give us the Spirit of God as we continue walking through a very difficult time in our lives, in our families, in our nation, and in our world right now. I pray this in the name of Jesus.
The silence steals my voice. You understand me. You understand me. Oh, come to me in the valley of unknowns. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me, God. Understand me. So I'll throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were. Oh, I believe, but help my unbelief. You understand me. You understand me. So help me reach the faith that's underneath. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me, God. You understand me, yeah. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were. The Father's hands, leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands, leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest the Father's hands, leave the rest, oh, in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands, leave the rest in the Father's hands. So I'll throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I'll stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. Oh, you're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were, yeah.
I just want to say thank you for joining in with us, whether you're a part of the crossing or whether you're just bored to death and you found a video and you clicked on it and it was engaging enough to make it all the way to the end. Way to go, that is awesome. And I hope that through this you learned that, you know what, you might have a God box. If you're not a Jesus follower, maybe you have a non-God box. But I hope that you would look outside of that box and realize God is so much bigger than anything that we could imagine. And that He has made Himself real. And He has given us signs to see. And that you would acknowledge and I would acknowledge if there's something to see, let's go look at it. Let's investigate it. Let's see what the evidence leads us to and base our decisions of faith off of that. I think that's what John would want us to do. I think that's what Jesus would want us to do. So, thank you for joining in. I hope it was helpful today, and I hope that you walk away this week inspired to live through another week. I know it is a difficult time. So no matter where you're at, no matter what you're facing, know that we are praying for you. We love you. We will see you here next week online for the Crossing Online service.